Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk webinar. I'm Douglas Clark, Global Director of Public Relations here at eMarketer. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you haven't joined us before, Tech Talk webinars are special presentations where we open our studio to guest presenters from the worlds of media, ad tech, and MarTech. The title of today's webinar is Beyond Clicks, the email marketer's role to building meaningful metrics for the CMO. And joining us today are Kara Trivunovic, Senior Vice President of Digital Solutions at Epsilon, and Shar Van Boskirk, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. They're going to be discussing how email marketers have moved beyond measuring just opens and clicks and are taking a closer look at email engagement, including how retail brand Coach executes this strategy successfully. Before we hear from our presenters today, please keep in mind you don't have to take notes. You're going to receive a link to view the slides and a full recording of today's presentations. Today's topic is very popular. We have a lot of registrations for the webinar that include leading B2B and B2C companies, and we want you to participate. You can use the window on the lower right-hand corner of your screen to ask questions. You can send them in to us at any time. We'll try to respond to as many as we can a little bit later. So let's get started. Kara, all yours.
Great. Thanks, Doug, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. As we said, I mean, you know, the goal here is to look at how email marketing is evolving, right? And as a tried and true channel for the better part of the last 20 some odd years, you know, the channel has evolved, but it remains a reliable channel for brands to work with. But the measurement of that channel has really stayed, you know, pretty consistent over the course of time. And so as we think about, you know, the opportunity here, you know, in order to truly understand how measurement metrics for the email channel, you know, drive, you know, and represent a wider consumer behavior, it's really important for us to kind of establish where it came from, right? So from an early days of email perspective, you know, personalization was kind of exciting, right? We could do this insert first name kind of functionality. We didn't have a lot of data, but what was really amazing about the channel was the ability to have some results and measurement in an immediate manner, right? Up until that point, you know, direct mail, you know, had some measurement capabilities, but it took time. And what was so enthusiastic, or what everyone was so enthusiastic about with the channel was truly this immediacy in the ability to measure success. But as our needs for data grew, our needs for reporting and measurement continued to grow, and really being able to understand, you know, who we're talking to, how we identify with them, and the opportunities for the data that we had. With the focus was really more on the personalization and the business rules, less about kind of measurement and where we were. Today, we're in this modern era of the consumer. There is an expectation to truly talk to an individual, right? To be able to connect with somebody, not just inside of a single channel, but as a brand in its totality, to recognize an individual inside of their ecosystem, their consumer. And the ability to, you know, drive that from a conversational perspective inside of just understanding the customer and personalizing communication is one piece of that. But the ability to really connect the entire experience and the entire journey from a measurement perspective is critical in order for us to continue to evolve that personalization, but also to really ladder up to what our true business outcomes and our brand measures of success are as an organization in its totality. And so as we think about, you know, this evolution, right, the evolution and need for personalization coincides very directly with what we're doing from a measurement perspective. So as we look at the brands that we, you know, work with and partner with, you know, at Epsilon, our goal is really to help them, you know, overcome what we see are key challenges that a lot of brands have. It starts with really being able to align and activate the data. As we look at that, you know, kind of growth trajectory for what's been happening with the channel, we had no data, then we had data we didn't trust. Now we have amassed so much data that getting it organized in a manner that will allow us to do anything with it has become really difficult. But once you have, you know, solved that challenge, then the ability to make decisions in real time becomes critical. So as you think about personalization and measurement, you know, the ability to, you know, make a decision and to be personal at a moment in time becomes increasingly important, and the measurement behind that and what's next to happen or what's likely to occur becomes really critical. And it's a key element of personalization. And as people's attention spans become more and more fleeting, being able to identify that opportunity or that moment in real time becomes very critical. But the challenge that we see for most brands today is while yes, achieving the first two is challenging, what we really see as the biggest challenge right now is the ability to create and manage the content necessary to support those narratives. So you can have all the data, you can have all the decisions, but if there's no content to support that narrative, then it becomes very difficult to manage. And then as we think about that, the message again is we're looking at the consumer in its totality. As an email marketer myself for the better part of the last 20 years, it's hard to think outside of the channel, but in today's day and age, it's really critical to do that. And so, we have to be able to think outside of email. How do we align against the customer's expectations on where we're talking to them, when we're talking to them, and what are those moments where we connect? And then, like I said, what we're really focusing on today is that holistic measurement. We have to get out of our opens and clicks and kind of this episodic reporting that we do in email because we can, and really think more longitudinally and a little wider about what we're talking about. And we'll dive into that a little more as we move through this today. So really just very quickly, as we think about, what we know and what we're thinking about an individual, we also have to take our view of data outside of, the email kind of world as well, right? And so as email marketers, we've historically had some access to some demographic data. We've also had some access to, how they're engaging with the email channel. But in order to really get this holistic view, we have to expand, what we're considering. And this is a scenario where, more is more, right? Being able to understand how a consumer is engaging with the brand across multiple channels and how that then can influence the decisions that we're making in our email program is really critical. And it's important to, laddering up to what it is the CMO needs. So I think, as we look, through the rest of this conversation, we're going to really look at how can we tie what we do from a core measurement perspective as email marketers to, what the CMO cares about. And I think as a first opportunity to start that, Shar, I'm going to hand it over to you so we can talk a little bit about, what you're seeing as top priorities for the evolving CMO.
Very good. Thank you so much, Kara. Hi, guys. This is Shar Van Boskirk with Forrester. So glad to be joining the conversation today with Epsilon, and thanks to our host, eMarketer. As Kara mentioned, we're talking here about how measurement has to move beyond a single channel, and the idea that you might be measuring some things that can actually influence much higher level marketing goals. And so I just wanted to start my portion of the conversation with a little bit of data to represent what you already know, which is that CMOs have more on their plates than ever before. But maybe if you think about the specific goals that they're trying to accomplish, that'll help you think a bit about what you're measuring. We're also going to talk about the value and methods for tying some of the metrics that you track at the email level to higher level marketing and business goals. So just take a note here to think about the sheer volume of goals that a CMO is being tasked with. If we look at the data that you're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen, this is no fewer than 2/3 of CMOs are indicating that they have to grow revenue while also improving their experience and their products and improving differentiation and fixing their brand and innovating and reducing costs. That all of these things have to happen for everyone. And some of these might feel in conflict with each other. How do we do all of this and save costs? So this is the environment that you are potentially working to support. Your CMO is trying to accomplish all of these things, has responsibility for all of these things, and potentially trying to manage them all at the same time. Now, I want to suggest that there is an evolution that should happen within the marketing function to make some of these goals more realistic than others, or maybe help a CMO focus on some particular areas of greater priority. And I'm going to introduce you to a model that I also think will help as you think about what should you be measuring and how could you be helping the marketing function achieve a higher purpose. So I want to suggest that the marketing function today should have three primary responsibilities. And these are the three things that are in the outer circle that you see here: customer understanding, brand strategy, and brand experience. And I want to spend a moment talking about what each of these is so that you can think about what they are and how you might measure when they are happening. So the first idea, customer understanding, means that it is marketing that is the advocate for the customer everywhere. So this might start out as traditional market research, but it evolves into marketing being the ambassador, telling everyone, the product team, the post-sales team, everybody, who is our customer, what do they need, and why do they do what they do. Then brand strategy hopefully feels like a task or a set of responsibilities that is already part of the marketing function for you. Let me just point out that what's different today is that brand strategy is about what you stand for as a company and how you live those values. So this isn't just communications. This isn't just some imagery to represent who you want to be. This is actually who we are in our soul and how do we live that identity everywhere. And then brand experience is about all of the different places where that brand strategy can be demonstrated. So this could be very traditional marketing communications, media buys, email communications, but this could also be any place where I might interact with a brand. When I stay at a hotel, the hotel room itself is going to be a place where I experience the brand values. When I'm in a store and I'm interfacing with a sales agent, that's a place where I can experience the brand values. So if you buy my notion that marketing should be the keeper of customer experience, customer understanding, brand strategy, and brand experience, then there are four things that modulate in order to make those responsibilities real. And those four things are in the inner circle I've got here: mindset, process, talent, and insights. Mindset is about how you think about yourself and the purpose that you have in marketing. Process is about the way you work. Talent is about the people who are doing the work. And insights is certainly about what you know about your customer, but it is also about how marketing activity ties to business goals. And that's what we're really here today to talk about. It's funny, when I spoke to marketers when I was putting together this research, they told me almost without question that for them, one of the biggest disconnects was that their marketing activity did not obviously tie to high-level business goals. Things like the stock price, earnings per share, things that were the primary metrics that the CFO cared about were things that marketing activity wasn't tethered to. And I want to talk with Kara today about how to tie the activity that you're doing at the email level to higher level CMO goals, and then how to tie that activity to higher level business goals. Now, before we get into some more on that, we want to hear from you. So we've got a poll question that we're going to ask about what you're measuring today. And hopefully we've got some examples from you of things that maybe you're measuring outside of just opens and clicks. Maybe you're measuring email engagement, which could be how are people engaging with the range of communications that you send over time. Maybe you're measuring revenue per send, per click, per open. Maybe you're measuring content performance, eye tracking studies where you're looking at what content is being received in different ways by your audience. Maybe you're measuring conversion. Hopefully you're measuring some of these. So take a moment to indicate what you're measuring, and then we're going to take a look at the data and see where we're all shaking out in terms of what beyond opens and clicks we're tracking.
metrics. About a third of you said conversion rate, another third said revenue KPIs, about 25% said email engagement, and another 10% said content performance. So thanks so much for participating in that poll question today.
And we'll share with you guys some examples, or a very specific example about, how one brand is, why this was critical and how we can think about it a little bit more moving forward. So today we get a lot of conversation about, we need to do more personalization, right? And we really need to kind of figure out how we do that and then what it means for our brand. And Coach is, an iconic brand that is very tethered to and loyal to their branding. And so the idea of being able to augment how they're talking to an individual isn't necessarily at the core of their business, right? Because a lot of it is about how they put themselves out into the market. And so as we were working with them, their goal really was to figure out how they can drive more personalization inside of their conversations with their consumers. And where we started was in a very simple place where a lot of email marketers start, which is optimizing the inbox copy, right? So as we think about subject lines and pre-header text, how do we align and optimize that experience for an individual? And as email marketers, our immediate thought is that by optimizing that conversation, we will then drive a higher open rate. We will drive a higher click-through rate. That will then inevitably drive a higher conversion rate and hopefully a higher average order value. And as we were working through this program with Coach, which was an 8-week program, I can tell you that inevitably, if all we were looking at were email metrics, this would have been a massive failure. As we look at the impact that the conversation had on open rates, it was about the same, right? I mean, the business as usual versus the test audience, we didn't see marked, kind of lift in open rates. We did not see a massive lift in click-through rates. But because we were really looking at how do we impact the experience of the customer overall, we were looking at a much wider data set. We were looking at their website traffic. We were able to tie into and get an understanding of their transactional information, both on and offline, which are metrics that email marketers don't typically look at. And so what we found, and we've actually replicated this with a few other brands as well in more recent terms, is that by optimizing the inbox copy, we did not drive a higher open rate. We drove more website traffic. So the information inside of the inbox was so relevant to the individual that was, seeing it, that rather than go through the effort of opening the email, they went directly to the website. And so we were able to drive lift in their website traffic significantly higher than what they were seeing from their business as usual audience, even from those that were clicking through from their email. Also, what we found was that we were able to drive, for the audience that received that communication, right, or those communications over the course of time, we drove a lift in their overall average order value. And what was fascinating was that it actually drove a lift in in-store average order value. And so we were able to really make a connection between their email subscribers, which tend to, often represent your most valuable customers anyway. But we were also able to tie that to their in-store experience, which again, being able to look at how is a consumer engaging from an email marketer's perspective, we don't tend to think about, whether we drove somebody into the store or not and how we can tie that back. And so these were really critical business measures for their organization to understand. And it was a big win for them to actually be able to tell this story and to be able to identify this audience of people that, we were doing this test with. As you think about then the ability to continue to evolve that idea or that narrative, right, it becomes really important to understand how your business looks at the consumer, but also how your consumer engages with you, right? So as we think about this, the evolution of what we were talking about is now being able to identify the types of consumers we have and how can we optimize the experience for them as a brand in its totality. And so, as you can imagine, Coach has a varied, type of customer from a luxury to a cost conscious. And so ultimately the goal is long term to be able to tap into these audiences and, you know, and be able to then roll that up to what we're doing from an organizational perspective.
So I'm going to pick up on a piece that Kara mentioned there, which is this relevance between marketing engagement and customer engagement, which are very close to each other, but are actually not the same thing. And let me just spend a moment explaining why I think it even matters that we think of them separately. So the idea of marketing engagement is measuring the impact of a marketing activity. Customer engagement is the engagement that a customer has with the brand over time. And so it may be that measuring marketing engagement helps get you to an understanding of customer engagement, but it should not be the place where you stop. So this is sort of, if we play out this idea of measuring things beyond opens and clicks, then using what you can measure in your email to decide things like what happened in store, and then using what happens in store as a gauge of the value of the customer or the brand affinity of a customer, that's where we start getting to a higher world order associated with marketing measurement. So I feel like when we think about the limitations of measurement today, most of the time people are measuring insufficiently. I think Kara would agree with this, and probably the folks on this call know you've done this too, where marketers tend to cherry pick the easiest to measure interactions. So this is why we track opens and clicks, because we can. They're the easiest to measure. And we also tend to bias toward volume, because counting as many as possible is easier than trying to count a nuance associated with an activity. So I just want you to think about, what if there's a way for you to think about this in a little bit more nuanced way, and think about that it might not just be counting actions, but what if you counted 3 dimensions that are part of measuring customer engagement? And these certainly start with actions. They start with behaviors. But let me also encourage you to track some additional things as well. So first of all, yes, track behaviors. Behavioral metrics indicate that a customer knew your brand, got the message, and took action based on the message that they saw. This could be a site visit, a click, an open. It makes a good foundation of the overall marketing engagement metric, but it alone isn't tracking customer engagement, and it's not even tracking the response to that behavior that a customer might feel. So here's where I want to encourage you to think about tracking something else as well. I'm going to encourage you to track these 2 other things. The first is involvement. So this is the level of interest and intent that a customer has with a marketing message, a product, a service, maybe following the exposure to a marketing message. Think about involvement as the depth of action that a customer takes with your brand. So this isn't just a visit to the site. This is what happened during that visit. This is what content did I engage with? How long did I engage with that content? How did I interact with an ad or a video that you made available to me? And then the third dimension here is this emotional element. Emotions signify a sentiment that a customer experiences or feels when viewing your marketing message. So this could be sentiment in response to the involvement, in response to the behavior that I took action on. So the idea here is that probably you are defaulting to behavioral metrics, but these other 2 dimensions can actually give you some depth of understanding of your customer that can help feed that insight dimension to help inform some of the decisions that you're making about your customers and about your marketing plan. Now, I don't want you to think that we're going to leave you here measuring in a vacuum. I want to leave you with a few recommendations for how to hopefully put together everything that you've heard from us this morning. So a couple of guidance ideas for you. First of all, think about conducting a cause and effect analysis to tie engagement to business outcomes. So this is the idea of specifically looking at what is the large goal that you're trying to accomplish, and what activity, what behaviors, what involvement, and what emotional response do you need to drive in order for that business outcome to be accomplished. By looking in that equation-based way, you can think not just about what you're trying to reach, but you can think about the specific key performance indicators, the specific activities, the specific involvement metrics, the specific emotions that you want to derive in your marketing materials. I also want to encourage you to place engagement in the context of particular points in the customer journey. Think about marketing engagement as being something that is driving a customer to the next stage in their relationship with you, or maybe the next stage in their life cycle or in their decision process. So that takes a lot of pressure off of a single communication. One of your emails doesn't have to make a customer go all the way from 0 to 60, all the way from no engagement to a lifetime of loyalty. It just has to move me a little bit. And so this is the idea of thinking about what metrics do you want to track at different stages of a customer's life cycle. This will help you determine how well that customer is moving forward, how well marketing message A delivered customer to marketing message B. So the awareness phase or the initial get to know a customer phase might have different metrics compared to a lower funnel type of activity. Then I want you to work with partners to identify engagement metrics. This is the idea that if you're sitting there thinking, boy, I just don't know what in the world we would measure, I want you to look to the partners that you already have for things that they might recommend or things that they are measuring with other clients. So this is a great place for a conversation with Epsilon that is doing this type of work on an hourly basis with different kinds of clients across industries, where they can point out, these are the kinds of metrics that we used with Coach. This is what we tried with them. This is what we decided didn't work. And here are the kinds of things that we think might work in this situation. And then my last point here is to remember that sometimes metrics aren't just about moving a customer along. Sometimes you might actually be measuring efficiency gains in your own operations. And especially with email, don't lose sight of that. You might find that sometimes it becomes less time consuming to assemble a certain type of message, or maybe it takes less communication to get a customer to move along in their purchase process. And those efficiency gains can be really valuable business outcomes as well.
Great. So as we wrap this up, I think, the opportunity here is, the thought is that this sounds great, right? Lots of heavy lifting, lot of work to do. But there are some quick things, that we can kind of take away from these conversations, some easy places to start. Even if you just start with what you have as an email marketer in your hands today, which is, taking inventory of what you measure today, combine that with what your marketing leadership is measuring and defining as organizational success, and identify where those gaps are and where alignment needs to kind of evolve to. You can also, as you look at that inventory, see some gaps, start asking some questions. Why do those gaps exist? Is it information that you have access to as the email team, or is your organization even structured in a way that will allow you to support that line of thinking? And really being able to identify and understand what are the low-hanging fruit opportunities to start filling those gaps. And then finally, kind of working across the organization and collaborating with your teams. Again, as we take the look at this Coach example, had we relied solely on the email metrics, that program would not have been deemed successful. But we have to understand that, the customer's engagement doesn't happen in the funnel that we expect it to happen. And we really have to start looking at, what is that wider experience and what can we measure to help, identify and round out that story. With that, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Doug to close us out on our Tech Talk and take us into any QA if we have time.
Okay, terrific. Thanks so much to you both. That's some great information for our audience. And by the way, Epsilon has been a longstanding partner with eMarketer since 2006. If you'd like to see how your company is tackling the email personalization journey and to get a few tips from Epsilon for getting to the next stage, you can check out their quiz on their website, explore.epsilon.com/getpersonal. There's been a lot of discussion around AI and machine learning. How is it being used in email, and how has it driven improved sales impact?
Yeah, I think it's wide, right? I mean, some of it is truly around timing, right, and being able to optimize when you send, where you send, and who you're sending to. But also just for content decisioning, what is the right piece of content that you should be sending to an individual based on what the machine can see and know and understand about a customer? I think that's where you see kind of the more is more when it comes to data, by allowing a wide data set for decisioning and machine learning. You're not biasing the machine in the decision it's making, and sometimes it's a little contrary to what the brand thinks. In doing that, though, we have the opportunity to really hone in on an individual and drive kind of the behavior that, again, we're looking for. So I think based on the work that we've been doing with the brands that we partner with, it's about optimizing to the outcome. So if you're looking to generate more time on site or site traffic or branding and recognition versus revenue and conversion, we optimize accordingly and then measure against that success.
Shar, I'm going to send this one over to you. Earlier, you asked the audience how their company is doing with measurement tactics. We, as email marketers, understand the importance of expanding our measurement strategy, but it's costly to do so. Any advice for how to get leadership's approval or buy-in?
Sure. I generally find that the prove it works is a good strategy. And by that, I mean, if you can do in a very small trial, something that perhaps doesn't divert a lot from the work you're doing already today, to show that a more advanced approach to measurement actually generates better results, kind of like the coach example that Kara shared, then that makes it very easy for people to say, okay, I'm willing to give you more resources, more time, more budget. It's sort of like, if I can prove that 1 + 1 actually equals 3, then probably you're going to be willing to support me in doing that. So I think if you can do anything to provide a little proof that your approach is going to pay off, that will go a long way in getting your management to pay attention.
Great, thanks so much. Kara, I'm going to send this question to you. The question is from Bob in Pittsburgh. We need to focus on our data and make sure we have the right data. What steps should we follow, and how can we best evaluate to see if our data is right and helping us achieve our goals?
So I think it's important to, clearly take inventory of your data, and understand what you have and what you have access to leverage. But where the data becomes valuable is where you can align it to what you're trying to achieve. And so, there is kind of a crawl, walk, run effort associated with that, because I find that these types of opportunities or these types of efforts can swing out of control very quickly, and you kind of get into this paralysis analysis scenario. So I think, depending on where you're starting, as an email marketer, right, we start talking about, the opportunities with personalization. Well, what is it that you want to personalize? What do we know about the customer? And how do you align that to then the business outcomes you're trying to drive? So if you're trying to optimize for revenue, right, or orders, number of orders, or an increase in average order value, there's going to be specific data points that are going to be the most valuable in helping to drive that, and then you can build on it from there. If you're trying to drive site traffic or downloads or just other elements that aren't necessarily revenue or conversion driven, there's going to be different data points associated with that. This is something that we partner with our clients on all the time, right? Because it isn't an easy answer. But there is an evolution that can happen, and to Shar's point, it's the prove it kind of function, right? Is as you get more adoption or more interest in your outcomes and the performance based on small investments in data, it begets bigger investments in those opportunities. And so it definitely is an evolution. It's not a one-time, one and done kind of thing. And I would suggest working with, a partner to help you achieve that. Like I said, we do this with our clients all the time, because sometimes an outside perspective is a little less biased than what you're going to see internally.
Okay, great. And we have time for just one more question. Kara, this one also to you. Can you share some more details and insights on one-to-you? What actions related to email are brands taking to integrate a one-to-you strategy in their email marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I know we breezed through it really quickly, but as we think about, this idea of one-to-one, right, is really about, being able to communicate with an individual. And that's something as an email marketer we've been able to do for quite some time. I mean, if you think about like the real-time triggers and, the ability to send transactional messages to an individual, that is kind of the idea of one-to-one. Getting into a one-to-you kind of scenario is again, it's about the recognition of the customer, right? I mean, email is one of the channels that is probably one of the few channels that we have an opportunity to really embrace a dialogue with our consumer as a marketer. And I'll just leave you with the funny thought that, I think, email, I've historically said email is very much like a bad blind date, right? You sit across the table from a blind date who proceeds to tell you all about themselves without ever taking a breath for, them to get to know you. And as email marketers, we do that a lot, right? We just hammer people over and over and over again with the conversation that we want to have. And we really need to get to this place where we are having a dialogue with our consumer, then being able to understand and recognize their response to a message that we sent, right? Did they click? Did they not click? Every action or inaction is an indicator of what we should say next, right? We should be able to then follow that dialogue and understand about the customer. And so it's not just about a moment in time, right? It's about having a conversation and really engaging with those individuals at a personal level over time.
Okay, great. That is all the time we have for the Q&A portion. Kara and Shar, thanks so much for the great information. We really appreciate it. If you tuned in today, we hope you got something out of it. We really appreciate you tuning in today. Before we wrap up, just want to take a second to let you know what's coming up across eMarketer's media channels. Tomorrow, we're going to have another Tech Talk webinar lined up, on-demand gen strategy. And after the July 4th holiday, we'll be back with another on customer experience management for B2Bs. You can also check out and register for upcoming analyst and Tech Talk webinars. Just go to our website, emarketer.com/webinars. On the audio side, don't forget to tune in to our Behind the Numbers podcast. It is hosted daily by our host, Marcus Johnson. And finally, please check out the new eMarketer daily forecast videos that bring our forecast to life. You can find them every day in the eMarketer daily newsletter. So again, you're going to receive a link to today's presentation. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. Again, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you tuning in today. And thanks so much to our partners today, Forrester and Epsilon. We'll see you back here next week on another Tech Talk.